Right to a channel of light fluid. Kaleidoscope effect is quite appropriate for the style of storytelling I do when I don't have the illustrations of VN. I'll explain about that and about this story at the end. But for now, I'm going to read you Heath Street. The wind that all underground travellers know, the one that blows out of the tunnel to herald the arrival of a train. A man standing on the platform looks up as he feels it. An interesting-looking man? Perhaps to some. His blue eyes are deep-set under heavy eyebrows. His beard is the wrong length to be following a trend, and his sandy hair is just shy of the point where it could be called shaggy. He's not some office worker who stayed extra late to earn some brownie points. Denim jacket, jeans, and a grey hoodie? Definitely not one of those drones. The train stops and he enters a quiet car, sitting down as if he needs to rest. A wolf design on the hoodies reveals he places his hands on the back of his neck and leans his head back. His eyes close for a moment, then open to focus on the line diagram over the windows. So, across to Bank, then down to Stockwell, hop on the Victoria to Finsbury Park, and then westbound Piccadilly, he thought to himself. See how the time goes, then jump back onto the Northern for the final stretch. It was no fun to be travelling this late, but it's better than the alternative. Would it help if he could travel all night? Maybe. But then there was also the problem of overshooting, ended up past where he wanted to go if he fell asleep. The tunnel ring slid past the window to be replaced by Tottenham Court Road Station. An older couple entered his car, giving him a wary look as they did so. He could almost read their thoughts. And watch out for that one. Another hairy layabout, probably drunk as well. So many people were transparent when you could watch them. Body language revealed a lot. They were sitting at the far end of the car, as far away as possible within range of his peripheral vision. Yes, definitely a little nervous. Perhaps not used to being out this late. Maybe been to the theatre as a special treat. Now they have to deal with me on the tube. He smiled dryly at that. The train sped through the remains of British Museum Station. As always at places like that, he wondered how many passengers saw it or knew what it was. He'd always been interested in the underground. These monthly-long journeys had given him more time to think and observe. On the deep-level tubes, anyway. He gave the Aldwych branch its customary moment of silence as they pulled into Holborn. Another couple entered the car, causing the original pair to relax. Just wait until you realise they're vampires who've taken the pledge or are about to fall off the wagon, the man thought, though probably defaming the couple as he did so. Mind the gap. Mind the gap. The official anthem of Bank Station played as the man stepped out of the train. He took his time walking to the Northern Line platforms. Anyone interested enough to watch him, of whom there were none on the system, would have noticed a certain tiredness in his walk. He made his way to the southbound Northern platform and waited for the next train. This time he was fortunate to have a more or less empty car for the trip. Another man joined him briefly, who was more interested in listening to his music than paying attention to anyone else. Then changed to Stockwell for the Victoria, another quiet station this time on a weekday night. As was usual on a night like this, part of his mind was very aware of everything around him, while the rest was musing on other matters. His attention was drawn to a young man further along the platform. He was standing a little close to the edge and seemed to be worried about something. It might be nothing, but he decided to wander down the platform a short way. As he had hoped, the movement caught the other man's eye and he moved back from the edge a bit. He smiled at him and cast an eye up to the indicator. Still a few minutes to the next train. He didn't want to leave the man alone, as if he was right, then he couldn't be left alone. His faked aimless wandering brought him in line with one of the exits from the platform in time for him to see a staff member walking by. He managed to catch his eye and move so that he could see both men simultaneously. He spoke quietly to the attendant, who nodded and busied himself with something down the platform, closer to the young man. The man, although apparently just looking around generally, was watching the others, and saw the staff member talking to the young man as the train arrived. Hopefully nothing would happen. He decided to assume that the young man would get some help and do well. If nothing else, it made him feel better about having to ride the trains on these nights. He continued his journey, contriving to miss the penultimate train at Leicester Square so he could stay a little longer underground. So, he rode the last train of the night to Hampstead and got off there. Taking the stairs would delay things, but he was too tired to take that option. The lift it was. He frowned as he felt a stab of pain through his head. Getting close to the surface meant the pain would get worse. Not that he could do anything about it, just prepare for what was going to happen as best he could. He shoved his hands into his pockets as he left the lift and reluctantly walked to the station exit. Some 4 weeks later, the same man is standing on another deep underground platform. Hair a bit more trim now and slightly different clothes, with the same body language of a man tired but not able to rest. He tried thinking of himself as some sort of Flying Dutchman, but being as he used the underground and was from Abercynon, the idea had failed at the first hurdle. Nor was he unable to get off at the station. It was just what happened when he left the station that caused problems. Still, he couldn't deny that the underground at this time of night was a different underground that people saw during the day. Fewer trains, sometimes nobody else on the platform. Many regular travellers would never see it like this, sticking to rush hours and early evening travel. He looked up as he felt the wind of an approaching train. Time to move on. He stepped onto the train and slumped into the first available seat, dragging a hand over his face. What he wouldn't give to be at home with a good book and a mug of tea, or maybe some scotch. Just taking it easy with nothing to worry about. A face came to mind. Of course he would think of him on a depressing evening like this. That was past and done with. Leave it alone. He tipped his head back and growled. This was turning to one of those nights where he could understand those who couldn't take it anymore and chose to jump in front of a tube train. He looked at the line diagram opposite. Up as far as Finsbury Park, then back down on the Victoria. Finsbury Park made him think of the Northern City, which made him think of Moorgate. For crying out loud, was everything going to depress him tonight? He took a chocolate bar from a pocket and started eating it. Maybe he just needed some more energy. There was nobody else in this car, which was a relief. Sometimes on nights like this, the worst thing was to be around other people, being aware of the aside glances they would give if he couldn't keep the mask steady. Sometimes they would slip and the pain and stress he was going through would show in a growl or an unguarded facial reaction. No. Much better to be alone when things were like this. Even books weren't any help. His mind sliding off the page he was reading, or the real-world problems interfering with and blocking the world the writer was creating. That was King's Cross out the way. York Road would have been next. Wouldn't that make an interesting story? Someone on a modern train automatically gets out at the first stop after King's Cross and finds themselves inexplicably on the platform at York Road. Or maybe not, unless the writer was good at quickly explaining what was wrong, when everyone knew as much as he did. There it was, a vague large tunnel that the train sped through. He closed his eyes for a moment as the train continued on. No, that was dangerous. Can't risk being carried onto an open section. He looked at his watch. He'd make it to Warren Street on the way back down before hitting the Northern. That way he'd go through Mornington Crescent. That was always fun to do. Might cheer himself up a bit, as far as was possible on one of these nights. Finsbury Park and back to the late lavatorial design of the Victoria line, as someone had called it. The passageways and platforms were empty and echoing now. Hardly anyone around. Someone should really make a modern creepy film set on the underground late on a weekday night. No boarded up spooky houses, just the well-lit but strangely empty railway system. Spooky in its own way. Sounds could travel and echo along the empty passageways tunnel deep underground. There were the strange winds generated by the trains. Then suddenly, the lone passenger. He jumped as somewhere what sounded like a spanner was dropped. Now he was scaring himself. More than a bit ironic, as many people would consider him the scariest thing on the system. Here was his train anyway. Time to get going. Back into central London. Well, Zone 1 anyway. That was central London, really, wasn't it? Now he's debating useless trivia with himself. Not a good sign, but all signs were bad at this time on this sort of night. All too soon the train brought him to Warren Street and he crossed to the Northern Line platforms. A shadow of the pain seemed to settle in his head, but that was probably just his own work, the stress of knowing what was going to happen. The train came in and carried him north. His mood lifted a bit as they stopped at Mornington Crescent, but descended steadily as he travelled on. Once more at Hampstead, the pain gnawing at him as the lift rose to surface level. He forced himself to stay calm and not show any signs of it as he walked to the exit, nodding to a member of staff as he did so. It was a cloudy night, but he could feel the baleful influence as he stepped out into the street. He kept at a walk until he was clear of the station, then set off running towards the heath, the pain growing more intense. He could feel himself hunching and baring his teeth in response to it. As soon as he found cover, he pulled a bag from his pocket and started stuffing his clothes into it, trying to act while he still had control. His jeans went in just as the pain hit a new level. He started growling as he began to lose control. Fangs exposed and claws digging into his paws. There was nothing in existence but him and the pain. When it subsided, a furry paw grabbed the bag and stashed it far into the clump of bushes. The werewolf stretched its limbs and loped off. 28 nights later, the man standing on the northbound platform at Collier's Wood. This time the hoodie is replaced by a checked shirt covering a t-shirt with a wolf on it. He has the same tired look in his eyes, though a close observer might notice pain there as well. He's travelled further south for a change, though it means travelling back on the same line. Sometimes people would miss their station and have to go back up one, so it wouldn't look too strange. A young woman walks onto the platform and moves up the far end. In her world, everyone travelling by underground is dangerous and to be avoided. An older man joins them, waiting for the train. He stands a little distance away from the man, but close enough to look at him unobserved and wonder about him. A middle-aged woman walks onto the platform, takes a spot not far from the two men. Her gaze rests on the posters opposite, while she is aware of what's around her. Outside, the rain is falling, and the full moon is hidden behind clouds, but down here on the underground it's warm and dry. The Edgware train pulls in, and the werewolf in human form steps on board. Once more he rides the deep tubes until late. Most people ignore him. This is London, after all. Some are wary of him. He doesn't match their mental checklist of trustworthiness. A very few wonder what it'd be like to know him better. Down here under the earth, he can avoid the influences of the surface until he is forced to face them. He can pretend that he's something other than what he is, and no one is any the wiser. As usual, his last journey of the night is on the Northern Line to Hampstead. A member of staff is at the lifts there, waiting for the last of the northbound passengers to leave so he can lock up. A passenger winces and raises a hand to his head as he leaves the lift, causing the man to approach and ask if he's well. The passenger smiles and replies he just has a bad headache, for wishing the man a good night. The underground man replies appropriately and watches as the passenger leaves. He shivers as his mind tries to persuade him that the monster passed by, looking out through the passenger's eyes and showing in his fangs. Outside, footsteps can be heard speeding up until they're running in the direction of the heath, running as if trying to escape what they carry with them. That was Heath Street, written by me. Some of you may recognise it. I did do it as a Halloween live stream with a couple of other stories a few years back. Not many people have seen it, trust me, I checked. So I thought I would do it again. And if you're wondering, yes, I do know a lot about the London Underground. And also, yes, I have travelled on it a lot, especially late at night. So just about everything werewolf goes through here, I've kind of experienced on the Underground. It is a very liminal space when you get late night, walking around somewhere like the Bank Monument Complex especially. Lots of empty, brightly lit corridors. It's quite strange if you ever get to experience it. Very different, as the werewolf notes, to the early evening and rush hour travel. And also, yes, some of what our guy here goes through is very, very like a level 10 cluster headache. I often make the joke it's actually less painful to turn into a werewolf than to have one of those headaches. So I hope you enjoyed it. I originally started it as an idea for a train anthology a few years back. I eventually wrote another one, which is also on the channel, 6:15 from Pontypool Road. Spoilers, that wasn't accepted. But I decided to just work on this one a bit more and kind of finish it. Probably could do with another polish, but I think it's good enough as it is. It's a interesting little tale. Oh, and Heath Street. That was a very early suggestion for Hampstead Station's name. Later got changed, but Heath Street is pretty much at the station entrance. So you learned something today. And if you want to learn more about the underground, he doesn't know I'm doing this and he has no idea who I am. Check out Jago Hazard's channel. I'll actually put a link in the description if you want to check that out. It's also on my recommended channels. Very, very interesting videos, mainly about the London Underground, lots of other trains and other stuff in London, but worth a watch, definitely. So what else is coming up? Figured things out finally. So this weekend we'll have Remember the Flowers, followed either Sunday or Monday by another story from MC Morado, another from his anthology. And then there'll be another MC Morado story, which I promised to do for Halloween. So that will be that. And after that, in November, I still haven't even figured out my schedule yet. So we'll see what happens, but a couple of new things will be coming up on the channel. Okay, so that's it for this. Oh, and yes. Jackanory used to have Kaleidoscope titles. And that was BBC children's programme run from mid-60s through about the mid-90s. And it was basically one person for 15 minutes telling you a story. Yes, that is pretty much what I do, only without the cameras. And yes, it influenced me a huge amount in my storytelling. When I say I learned from the best, I really mean it. Look up who read on Jackanory sometime. But as always, thanks to my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon. And my top patrons are Andy Peng, Smuto, Omar, Nova Starburn, Harvest Mouse Productions, Bieka, Kartek, Gobas Visser, Lexi Bucciarati, Bastian, Brian Hall, Tiger Cub, Ida Corval, Anubis Silverwind, Dissonance, Grizz, Spiderling, Kopi, Cindy Dragowolf, Evan King, Exact, Aaron Fox, and Mohammed Al-Zamel. Special thanks to all of them, and as always, thanks to all my patrons, and to you for watching. A little not so spooky but interesting story for the spooky season. Bye for now.